Cradle, Dogs of Fount, Chapter 36, Part 2. It is. I'm tired of them throwing us out into the damn woods and hoping a stinking turd they have sticks to the wall. We need sound strategy. The hell we going half-the-way around the world for? You okay? Nate softened his tone. You aren't losing your nerve, are you? I know we've been through a lot, and it's gotta be messing with you because the Heather I know would be entirely game. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, she said and tossed a wooden spoon into the soup. Red specks splashed onto the white fridge next to the stove. She went to the living room and sat on the couch, crossed her legs, and took out her screen and stared into it. Nate just looked over at her and smiled to himself and nodded. He would wait. Nate was in the living room with only one ceiling lamp on in a warm dimness. He was looking at his screen, catching up on any news that was coming out of Fount. He was wondering how his family was dealing and stopped before he thought too much about them, lest he feel like a deserter. The city and forest out the window was blackness, with only a handful of white shards of light at odd heights. Heather had been in bed for about an hour, and she hadn't opened up yet about the mission or anything else that would take a complete conversation to settle. He rubbed the back of his neck and stretched his shoulders and initiated a deep spine-cracking yawn. He closed the screen and slipped on his sandals and headed for their bedroom. The door had been closed the whole time, and it made him wonder, was he making too much noise? He opened it slowly and slipped in quickly, closing it again, trying to keep the light out. Heather didn't move. Nate hadn't seen her this tired in a while. The light from outside draped over her midriff and the covers that were on top of it. He couldn't hear her breathe. He stood next to his side and unlatched his black military watch and set it on his bare nightstand. He kicked off his sandals just under the box spring and pulled off his black track pants. He slid under the cool covers and knew he'd get a good night's sleep tonight. He lied on his back and stared at the blackness of the ceiling until it turned gray as his eyes adjusted. He waited for any important thoughts to come in his head before he drifted off. But Heather reached over and put her hand on his chest and started rubbing it in circles. He looked over at her and they smiled at each other. She exhaled loud enough to be heard and climbed over and on top of Nate. She kissed his forehead, his nose, and then his lips. Nate put both of his hands on her hips and let go. In the morning, he was the first one up for a change and felt comfortable just in his boxers. That wasn't normal for him, but it felt right. He was in no way an uptight person, but it made him uncomfortable to walk around anyone without any shorts or pants on. He had been sitting on the couch about 30 minutes ago, only to awaken now lying across it with drool running down his cheek. He sat up quickly and caught his breath. Heather was next to the couch on a brown cloth chair looking at her screen. She looked up at Nate for a moment and shook her head with a smile. You were knocked out, my friend, Heather added. You kept me up, woman. She gave a mock guilty look and went back to her screen. Nate straightened up and went to the kitchen for some coffee. He came back and cleared his throat. Babe, you coming, right? Nate asked. Would you leave me if I didn't go? You mean break up with you? No, you idiot. Would you leave me here and go anyway? Heather asked, eyes blazing. No, I would be pissed at you, but I wouldn't leave you here, Nate answered seriously. Why? Does it matter? Nate asked. She gave him a cold stare. Nate continued. I almost lost you to another man. I didn't like the way that crap went down, and I don't want to have to fight for you again because I know that will be the time you refuse to come back. She nodded and looked back at her screen. Nate sipped his coffee and nodded. They walked to the tarmac loaded with their issued packs along with their personal bags. Nate offered to hold a couple of Heather's, but she kept him from taking them off her. The huge UT-700 sat on the runway, shining brilliant silver on some surfaces and dull and dented on others. About half of the men and women who were being deployed were milling around the tail hatch of the craft, talking, smoking cigarettes, or unzipping and rezipping their packs to check if they forgot anything.